A rare discovery in Nunavut has scientists examining the effects of climate change on interbreeding between different species. It comes with the discovery of a hybrid bear. Only a handful of them have been spotted ever in the last decade. Our Johanna Wagstaff now with more on how we found out about this very intriguing grizzly bear polar bear mix.
Oh yeah, very intriguing indeed. And it was actually an Inuit licensed hunter who thought that he had an Arctic fox or polar bear in his sights up in Nunavut, about 250 kilometers north of Churchill. Once he got up close and personal, though, he realized he had something much more rare, a grizzly bear polar bear cross, either a Grolar or a pizzly, depending on who the father is. And scientists are 99% sure that this is a Grolar because the father was likely a grizzly bear. And it hasn't been tested yet, but this is based on the features. And you can see the dark colors around his eyes, the darker fur on the paws and the dark nose. And he also has a hump like a grizzly bear would and the long claws like a grizzly bear rather than the short, sharp ones like a polar bear. And this is all based on the fact that there have been other sightings since 2006, about half a dozen other hybrid species just like this, but not an albino because the nose would have been pink, a very rare Grolar.
Well, I get the birds and the bees, but tell me,
yes.
how on earth do we get a Grolar out of this?
Yes, this is where it gets really interesting. So it turns out that May is the beginning of mating season for grizzly bears and the end of mating season for polar bears. So grizzlies head out of hibernation looking for food and sometimes run into polar bear territory, about 30 kilometers north and towards the coastline. And I actually had a chance to speak to a polar bear biologist with 35 years under his belt, Dr. Sterling. Here's what he said about how this encounter may have been more than just a fling.
Polar bears and grizzly bears, both, they don't just sort of meet and have a one-night stand. They've got to stay together for several days and interact, and they'll go run back and forth to each other like this, and this will go on for days on end because polar bears and grizzly bears both have what's called induced ovulation.
I know, pretty romantic. So that means that these two bears would have had to have interacted with each other for days on time during this short overlap where both parties would have been interested, so to speak. And what's really interesting from a scientific perspective is how similar these two species are, both behaviorally and physically, that they would have basically been able to induce ovulation in one another. And that really traces back to genetics. Scientists didn't realize there were such similarities in the genes between the two. We've also seen hybrids, the F2 species, continue to mate with grizzly bears.
Aside from the biology of this, which I'm still fascinated by,
yes.
What about global warming and all of this? How worried, how alarmed should we be that this is happening at all?
Well, climate change is likely one factor, but not the only factor. Take a listen to what Dr. Sterling said about this.
I think the population has probably increased significantly, and then with climate change, we're finding more bears going further and further north. So there's a combination of these things all coming together, and it might be worth noting that not every interaction between a polar bear and a grizzly bear is happy.
Yes, there have been sightings of grizzly bears actually eating polar bears, so not all ends in love. But yes, a combination of strict hunting quota, better population management, but also we'll be watching for this in a warming climate as well.
All right, thanks, Johanna.
You're welcome.